Hey guys, welcome to Warhammer Stuff. So today we have 2,000 points of the Grey Knights Ward Makers versus the Adeptus Custodes Dread Host. So let's go ahead and check out the armies.
And like the video if you like the video, comment if you want to comment, share if you want to share it, and subscribe for more. Alright, so for today, I am playing Custodes. I am bringing 1,995 points of Dread Host and an Assassin. So what I have is, it's a 2 CP left over, 1,995 points, Dread Host. I have 2 units of Prosecutors. I have 2 units of Sagittariums with Misericordia. I have 2 units of Custodians with Sword and Shield. I have 2 Anathema Psychona Rhinos for protection of them. I have 1 unit of Alaris Custodians with Guardian Spears and Misericordias. I have the Sword and Shield Venerable Dreadnought, and then I have the Spear Venerable Dreadnought here. I have a Calexis Assassin because they're pretty cool, and they're also the most annoying one to deal with. Then I have Trajan Valoris as my Warlord, and he has his 2 Warlord traits. I have a Shield Captain, an Alaris Terminator. He is super dangerous. He is a beat stick. Trajan Valoris is supposed to be a buffer and a beat stick, but the Shield Captain is a teleporting beat stick. He basically has the ability to teleport into any enemy combat and fight there. Very powerful, very dangerous. Has 2 Warlord traits, and then I have a Vexilus Praetor and Alaris Terminator. The staff he has gives a buff, and basically I chose that all the guys nearby in 6 inches have -1 to be hit in range. Basically, they got dents covered. And that is my army.
Alright you guys, so I have 2,000 points of Grey Knight Ward Makers. I was kind of interested because Ward Makers has 2 characters that are locked to them, so you'll actually find I have both of them. And so I wanted to try and make it as elite of an army as possible. I really want to try and scrunch it down and just try and have just like all powerful units, or as close as you can get to that. And so I have the 2 named characters from the Ward Makers. So Grandmaster Valdis is my Warlord, because he has the he has to take the Warlord trait for the Ward Makers, which means if I roll a Psychic Power on an 8+, he can't deny it. I didn't really know what I was facing, so but anyway, so then I have Stern as the Brother Captain. He's just going to kind of help. He has a radius of objectives secured, because I don't have any troops in this army, so he'll be really helpful there. And then I have a Brotherhood Librarian who will help me change the tides of the warp, and basically just help aid my other guys. And then it moves into the elites. So because this is Arks of Omen, my mandatory unit type was elite. And so I have a Paladin Ancient who's literally just gonna do ancient things and buff my Paladins. Then I have an Apothecary to keep them alive. And then I have 4 squads of Paladins. Now each of them has a different psi weapon. So these Thunderhammer guys right up front have 2 psi cannons. I say Thunderhammer, Demon Hammers. And they basically are just going to beat everything to death, hopefully. And then I have one with 2 silencers. And these guys all have halberds. I don't know why these guys have stabs. That's actually my fault. But these are all halberds. And then the middle squad here, they'll have 2 incinerators and they have falchions. And then a squad with no heavy guns, just demon hammers. And so because again I didn't know what I was facing, so their heavy weapons partner with kind of their main weapon, whether it's the falchions or the halberds or the demon hammers, just to kind of give them each squad kind of a task to do or an enemy to face. And then moving into heavy support, I have a purgation squad with just 4 side cannons to just drop in and blow stuff up. And then I have 2 Nemesis Dreadnoughts, one with a sword, one with a hammer. One has the heavy side cannon and the other has the Gatling silencer. Again, just different roles. One is for more mass units and one is for smaller, stronger units. So hopefully, even though this is a small army, it'll still be able to hit really hard and be able to adjust to whatever they're facing. So we'll see.
Yes, and all the actual details of our lists will be in the description. Follow a Google link. Yes, if you want to know exactly what we're bringing in detail. Alright, it is Mission 3-3, Secure Missing Artifacts. Control 1, Control 2, Control More. This is the one where we move objectives. So after we, before deployment, but after we know whose deployment zones are and before our reserves and transports are mentioned, Attacker moves 1 objective, A or B, 6 inches. Then Defender moves 2 objectives, A and B, 6 inches in any direction. And then Attacker A moves the very last unmoved objective. Center is not moved. And then you deploy. And basically each player marks 1 objective that's in their table half, and that is the key objective. And if you're able to control your opponent's key objective, you gain 3 points at the end of your turn. And that is the mission. Alright, so for secondaries, yeah, there's precious artifacts, which is control your opponent's precious priority objective. But for Custodes, assassination, he has 5 characters. This is pretty much an auto take for me. Abhor the Witch. I was going to take no prisoners because of all the 3 wound units he has, but 3 victory points for each psyker character that's killed. That's an easy assassination, so might as well do Abhor the Witch. I have no psykers, I have anti-psykers. And behind enemy lines. This one's very easy to do. I have teleporting coming in and stuff, and yeah, that's going to be simple to get. 3 victory points easy, 4 victory points pretty easy, and that's it for Custodes.
Yeah, so for me, usually I like to take as many of the army-specific secondaries as possible. Now, Grey Knights have 3. However, he has a super elite army, so that takes out the deep strike one, where I wipe a unit out on a turn that a unit deep strike, because that's not going to happen. And then the other one is demon specific, and so I'm not playing demon, so it doesn't count. So I have Purifying Ritual. So basically it's a psychic action. I have to do it on an objective, and then I gain points for each objective that's been purified, essentially. Then I'm going to take Grind Him Down, because honestly he just has a lot of... Oh no, that's the wrong one, sorry. I will change that, but basically no prisoners. Sorry, that's what I meant to take. Okay. And then Engage on all fronts, because honestly, I'm going to try and take his objectives. We're both small armies. Chances are we'll have a squad in each of the places trying to kill each other. So I figured might as well try that one. And that was my secondaries.
Alright, so for deployment, essentially what was going on as far as the Custodes go, I wasn't, so it broke it down to 3 parts of my plan. The first part was secure objectives, so the bulky rhinos got on the back end of each of my home objectives. I wanted them to be out of the way so that my melee and more important troops could easily take the front, and so my rhinos and the Sisters of Silence in them would be placed first and in the back, so I can make sure they were out of the way. Then, regular custodians went in so a squad of shields and a squad of guns on the top and bottom. That's basically it to even things out. And then when it came down to the dreadnoughts are mostly going to focus on the heavy fighting force of the army, so they're going to be in the center, so they're aiming for the center, so they're there. Trajan Valorous is giving them support. The my champion, whatever he is, shield captain, yeah, is also in support there. And then my Calixtus assassin is aiming for the center as well, because he is a nuisance. And that's entirely it. I didn't bother to counter my opponent because there really was no reason to, because I have so few. I'm playing my own game. I barely have enough guys to do what I want to do, so I can't really be countering him. And that's what I had in my mind.
All right, yeah. So basically the same thing. There's a little bit of countering, like with his dreadnoughts and my dread knights, but for the most part, my army is just gonna do what it was gonna do, which is basically move forward and sit on objectives and fight to the death. So, because we're both playing such tiny unit armies. There's no,
we're playing chess right now, basically.
Yeah. Or it's just gonna be checkers. We're just gonna run forward and first person to swing gets to jump the piece.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But yeah, so not a whole lot of a plan, just kind of spacing out some units, trying to spread out my characters in places they might do better in, or able to help the people more. And that was really it. So yeah, we'll see how that goes for me.
All right, who do we want to go first? I started last time, so I'll let you start this time. Who do you think? What do you think?
Well, I think that that's a good question. Going first in this case might be better for me. It gives me a little more time to move before your deep strikers come out. But if I go second, you will most likely move at least a little bit. I don't think you can make any charges off from there because you don't have any bikes or anything like that. So if I went second, I'd have more targets to shoot. I'd probably be able to charge you. So I don't know actually. But I'd only have one turn without deep strike.
Okay.
I think I don't know.
Well, I'll go then. Alright, so
Yeah.
if I get the first turn, I'm taking up defensive forward positions along the middle, the left side, and yeah, that's pretty much it. If I go second, you will have 2 turns to move around, which probably will benefit me in the end, as far as deep striking goes, but it'll give me a lot of targets to aim for. So I'll have more targets, and it'll help me maybe a bit down the line if I go second. If I go first, I'm just basically moving 6 inches forward and hugging up these sides here, getting away from your guns and your range stuff. So that's pretty much it. And yeah, that's pretty much how I think it would go. All right then, let's see what it is.
Right. Ah. I got a 6.
I got a 6.
You also got a 6. Interesting. Yeah. I
A
got
1.
4.
All right, you're up first. So,
Alright.
Grey Knights, turn 1.
Alright, you guys. So, starting off actually in the command phase, my Paladin Ancient gave my Purple Paladin squad the reroll hit rolls in melee combat. And then that was it for my command phase. I should have you know that the Tide of the Warp that is active for my army is Tide of Convergence. So it adds 6 inches to psi weapons, and nemesis weapons on an unmodified wound roll of 6 do mortal wounds, in addition to any normal damage. So basically in melee I do mortal wounds, shooting is 6 inches longer. Now obviously the mortal wounds are capped at 6, but you know, whatever. And then, so movement phase, I ran forward my red paladin squad and my apothecary up at the top. So the paladins ran 8, the apothecary moved 7. My purgators didn't run, they just tucked up against the wall, so they're still on the objective, but they're able to poke out. Not that they can actually see anything right now, but you know, they could if something was there. Then my Dread Knight moved forward, and I believe he can actually see stuff. And then my middle groups actually moved forward. None of them ran, because I don't want to get too far forward and then them just get beat up. But also, I wanted to keep the characters close by to them, and them be able to still use psychic powers. So that whole middle blob did not run. And then obviously the other Dread Knight out top also scooted forward. Now Stern and his green squad actually did run up. Now they were able to just barely touch that objective. So that's cool. But anyway, so yeah, so they're up there. Now Stern had to run, so those guys don't have any psychic powers that they can do because they ran, but you know, it was worth it, I think. And that was my movement phase. Pretty straightforward, just moving, you know. Alright, you guys, so my psychic phase was relatively successful. Everything except one psychic power went off. So some of them ran, so they obviously couldn't use psychic powers. So the Purgators gave themselves Astral Aim. The Nemesis Dread Knight, Blue Paladin, and Purple Paladin squads gave themselves Hammer Hand. The Nemesis Dread Knight with the hammer actually failed. He needed an 8 by the time it got to him, and he did not get it. So. And then the Paladin Ancient didn't use his ability. He needed it's an 18-inch range, so nothing was in range for it. Neither was the Librarian nor Grandmaster Baldus. Now, I actually forgot to click his ability, his psychic powers in. So just for the record, he has Empiric Amplification and Sanctuary, which one gives a 4-up invuln and another gives +1 damage for psi weapon. No, nemesis weapons. Or psi weapons, okay. So whatever they use, just not their bolters. And so that was the psychic phase, just a couple of buffs going around. Alright, you guys, so it was a pretty simple shooting phase. My Nemesis Dread Knight with the Gatling Silencer shot at his purple squad of Sagittariums, and they actually did 2 damage. 2 wounds went through, and so they, didn't kill anything, but 2 damage. Then the purple squad of Paladins shot at his red Dreadnought, and they actually got 1 wound through, but instead of being 2 damage, because they have the minus damage thing, 1 went through. And then my Dread Knight shot at his blue guy, also doing 1 wound. So, not great, but, as things get closer, it'll be a little bit more shooting going around. And that was the shooting phase. Alright, you guys, so 4 points. So they're just touching my priority, there you go, objective. And so I was able to get the 3 points for that one. Purifying Ritual, I actually forgot about it, but so what I did was I went back and I undid my Purgers, who are they? Purgators, because they just did Astral Aim, and it's not going to benefit them at all until even through his turn. So that's 1 point. So basically each turn I have to do it with multiple units, and I'll get points that way, which I didn't quite realize when I was picking it, but that's where we're at. So so I got 1 point there this turn, and that was basically it. Pretty mild turn. I didn't kill any models. I didn't move far enough into this third table quarter for any points on engage. So it's just a real basic turn as far as points go. So not great, but the rest of the game still has to happen.
Alright, a lot of chess movement or thinking. So, essentially, my red Galatian Dreadnought moved up. Blue Achilles Dreadnought moved in support. Trajan Valorous ran to follow up. Shield Captain Alorus Terminator ran to follow up. Green Custodian Squad moved forward, touching the cover. The blue Sagittarians on the bottom moved up to the wall to have line of sight to shoot. The Prosecutor Sisters, orange, got out of the Anathema Rhino, moved up so that they can have their anti-psyker ward up. Their Rhino then moved up to follow, then up top. The Calexis Assassin ran, made it to touch the center objective. Then the Red Custodian Sentinel Blades moved up to be at the position of the wall so that he can't charge through it and place his models there. The Yellow Prosecutors got out of the Rhino, followed up behind them. The Anathema, the Sagittarian moved up. They ran in the end, gave them 3 extra inches. Moved up, they got line of sight of the Paladins, and the Yellow Rhino moved to block line of sight from the Nemesis Dreadnought, and that was my movement phase. Alright, so for shooting phase, so first, the red Galatius Dreadnought fired at the Nemesis Dreadnought. Fired all stuff, only 1 of his weapons got through and did 3 damage to it. Then the blue Achilles Dreadnought fired it, did nothing. The Green Custodians fired at it and did nothing. Oh, up top, the Sagittarians fired at the Paladins up top, did nothing. Then the Yellow Rhino fired its Hunter-Killer Missile at the Nemesis Dreadnought that is on the bottom. He saved it. He rolled a 6 on his save. And the Rhino fired its Stormbolter into the top Nemesis Dreadnought, did nothing. Then the bottom blue Sagittarians fired at the Paladins, the green Paladins at the bottom, and 1 wound went through, or 2 wounds went through. 1 shot did 2 wounds. And that was the shooting phase. Alright, so for the charge phase, my red Galatius Dreadnought, he has an ability called Eternal Penitent, which basically gives him reroll charges, but because I already have reroll charges, they have a stipulation that if you have it, he gets +1 to charge. So you charge the Nemesis Dreadnought, failed. Rerolled it again, rolled the dice 1 at a time, failed. Then I did the Hail Mary of the blue Achilles Dreadnought trying to charge him, needed a 12, failed it. Got close, but still failed. And that was my charges. And that is my turn. Alright, I got Precious Artifact and nothing else. So we're going to see how the next turn goes. Might be a bit painful, but we'll see. I'm just hoping dumb luck carries me through the day, as it has done so many times before.
All right, you guys. So in the command phase, my Paladin Ancient gave my purple Paladins the +1 to hit thing from his thing. And then that was it. That's the only command phase thing I have. Then in the movement phase, my red Paladins and Apothecary just walked forward. I want to use some psychic powers and stuff for them and shoot. So they didn't run. My Nemesis Dread Knight walked forward, so there was no runs this whole movement phase. So he moved forward. He's 9 inches because the 3 middle pieces of terrain are not actually difficult terrain. They're just dense cover and light cover. So they make it hard to shoot, but not hard to move. And then the blue Paladins moved on to the middle objective, taking it from his Calexis, and Valdis and the Librarian snuggled up to the wall next to the blue Paladins. And then the purple Paladins and the Paladin Ancient also moved forward, no running, as did the Nemesis Dread Knight up there. He has a bone to pick with this whole front section here. Then Stern and the green Grey Knight or Paladins sat on the objective, so they did that, and that was the movement phase. All right, you guys. So for the psychic phase, I started off with my Apothecary, giving my red Paladin squad their 4-up invuln with Sanctuary. And then they didn't do anything this psychic phase. I was going to give them Hammer Hand, but I was like, no, I need to have the lower rolls on more important things. So my Dread Knight at the bottom, the one with the Great Hammer, got it off. And then my other Nemesis Dread Knight did not get Hammer Hand off. But then I got it off on a 10 with my purple squad. So they have Hammer Hand. So the Nemesis Dread Knight with the hammer and the purple squad of Paladins got it off. And then I tried to also give them Empiric Amplification from Voldis, but it did not work because he rolled too low. And my Librarian tried to smite the Contemptor, the red Dreadnought, which worked, but I only did 1 mortal wound. So it worked, but it didn't really work. Yes. Anyway. But then as well, going to the missions, my Grey Knight secondary, my Purgators did Astral Aim, as did my Green Paladins. Then I tried to do with my blue Paladins in the middle. However, they are in range of both his Calexis and the orange Prosecutor, so they were at a -3, and so they were unable to do that. So that cost me 2 points right there. I was still able to get 2 points from it, but still. And so that was the psychic phase. All right, you guys. So for this shooting phase, I started with the Paladins and the... Oh, I guess not the Apothecary. He doesn't actually have a gun. So they shot at the purple Sagittarium. They were able to do the 1 wound needed to kill off that one guy. Then I shot with my Nemesis Dread Knight. No, then I shot with the blue Paladins in the middle, at the Calexis Assassin. Now, they had 2 flamers, so I was pretty confident there. However, when it came to the wound roll, I rolled a bunch of 1s and 2s. I think it was like 7 or 8 of them. And so there was only 1 wound that actually went through out of those. So, but he failed to save. So I did 1 damage, and then their Stormbolters did a little bit more. So I chipped away at the Calexis. Threw a bunch of different guys and eventually got him down to 1 wound left.
Could not make a single 4-up save.
That's
ridiculous.
Right. You ended up re-rolling 1 on the tail end and got it that way. Otherwise, he actually would have died, exactly. But so Valdis shot at him, the Librarian shot at him, the Paladin Ancient and the Purple Squad Stormbolters all shot at him. And then the Nemesis Dreadnought with the Gatling Silencer, so the one by the Rhino, shot at the red Dreadnought, taking him down. I think it was only 1 or 2 wounds.
Yeah, 1.
Yeah, and then the Purple Paladin shot at him, doing another wound. And then the Nemesis Dreadnought shot at the blue Dreadnought, so the Contemptor Achilles Dreadnought, doing, I think it was just 1 wound again. Or no, 2 wounds. Either way. So basically just kind of doing some chip damage here. And then my brother Captain Stern and the Green Paladins shot at his blue Sagittarium and did nothing because he has light cover behind the building. And then my Purgator shot at his Rhino, doing 2 damage, so 1 wound went through essentially. And that was the shooting phase. Alright, you guys, so for the charge phase, it was all around very depressing. I started with my Nemesis Dreadnought at the bottom, so with the Great Hammer. And he did a dual charge because I wanted him to fight the Dreadnought, but the green guys were too close, so, you know, whatever. But he got in with like a 10 or something, a 9 or a 10. And then this is when it got really sad.
I'll point out one thing because it's supposed to happen at the beginning of the charge phase. So I used a 1 CP stratagem called Tanglefoot Grenade. I targeted his purple paladins, and basically I would subtract their charge distance by a d6. I rolled a 1, but I did do it, so.
Yeah. So I started with my blue paladins because I really like Calexis is super annoying. I need to get rid of him for my psychic phase. But they failed the charge, and then I used a command point and they failed again. Then I went to my purple paladins who needed an 8 and they failed. And then my other Nemesis Dreadnought charging his Rhino needed a 6 and he failed. And so all in all, super depressing charge phase, but we'll see if my 1 Nemesis Dreadnought can do what he is there to do. So yeah, that was a charge phase. Alright, you guys, so for the fight phase is a mix of emotions here. So he, at the end of the charge phase, consolidated his red Dreadnought in, spending a command point, I believe, on it. So he got into combat, so what I did was I split my attacks with my Nemesis Red Hammer, or Great Hammer, or whatever. 2 attacks on the red guy because he had more damage, and 3 attacks on the blue guy because he had less damage. And so what I did was the 2 attacks actually both hit on the red guy, the red Dreadnought, but only 1 went through, so I used a command point to re-roll it, and then I rolled just under the damage to actually kill him, but then I remembered that he has Hammer Hand on, so the re-roll for the wound roll actually was free, so then I used a command point on the damage roll, and that was actually able to kill his red Dreadnought. Then my 3 attacks, 1 missed, 2 went through on the wound. No. 2 missed, 1 went through on the wound, and it went through, but it didn't do enough damage, so I basically needed a 5 or 6. So I wounded on a 6, so it did a mortal wound, but he had 5 wounds left. And because of his -1, I needed to do 3 damage, so I needed a 5 or a 6, and I rolled a 1, so he took 3 damage. And then he swung back and basically insta-gibbed him. So I guess it's technically a trade for a trade, but I don't think it was an even trade, so I don't know. So anyway, so that was the fight phase. Then his units consolidated, and that was it. Alright, you guys, so I controlled 1 and I controlled 2. I'm controlling my priority objective, so I got 3 points there. Purifying Ritual, I got 2 of those psychic actions off, so I got 2 points there. No prisoners, I didn't kill any infantry this round, and engage in all fronts. My red paladins are still not within the 6-inch zone, so I got no points there. So not good for points, but I did get some. So, but we'll see, because now he's got all the counter charges, and so I think this game is going to start going pretty quick at this point.
Alright, so for the movement phase, focusing heavily on the center. It's hard to decide where to go for the overall place of the battle, but when in doubt, always play the objective. So I took all my guys in the center and focused them to move towards the center objective and deal with his blue paladin squad. Contemptor Hercules Dreadnought moved into position to deal with Nemesis. Calexis Assassin moved up to irritate more. Shield Captain Trajan Valorous moved up. Custodian with Sentinel Blades moved up. It's getting hard to decide what to do. And yeah, and apart from that, I shifted over my red and yellow squads that are on the top left. A Psycho Rhino moved up to block more. The bottom orange Rhino moved up to get line of sight of that Nemesis Dread. And then my Deep Strikes came in. My Allarus Terminators and my Vilix Praetor came in the back to start getting points. And yeah, and we'll see what happens. Alright, so shooting phase. So I'll start at the top. The Allarus Terminators and the Vexilus Praetor, I combined their ballista, or their ballistas grenade launchers. They fired at the squad that was on his back objective. They killed two of them. Then the Allarus fired their Guardian Spears and wiped out the squad. After that, then my Calixus Assassin fired against his Brotherhood Librarian. Even though he was like protected by the squad and stuff, the Calixus Assassin has the ability to single out Psychers even if they're characters. So he was able to shoot at them, and he managed to do 3 wounds to him with his Animus Speculum, which is an assault D6 weapon with Psychers nearby, strength 5, AP -4. 1 damage each though. And so did 3 damage to him. After that, then my Contemptor Achilles Dreadnought fired into the Nemesis Dreadnought with 2 shots of his spear thing. Both went through, did 6 damage. Then my Shield Captain Allarus Terminator fired at his Paladins, so did Trajan Valoris, and then the Custodian Sentinels. I forgot about my Mongto rule thingies, which basically would allow me to shoot twice in the shooting phase if I didn't run. But how it helped here is that I forgot my Dread Host ability, that if I'm within 9 inches, my AP goes up by 1 for shooting. So I forgot that for the first wave of shooting. On the second wave of shooting, I did not, because Shield Captain got to fire again, so did Trajan, and my Custodians there, the Green Squad, fired their weapons a second time, because they're Auric weapons, and did pretty good. I killed like 2 Paladins, yeah. And my Sagittarians on the bottom fired, successfully killed 1 Paragon, or Paladin, Green Paladin on the bottom, did wound. The Sagittarians up top killed 1 Paladin, although that's not really going to mean anything. And yeah, and that was my shooting phase. Alright, so for the charge phase, Green Custodians charged his Paragons, made it in. Trajan Valoris charged them as well, made it in. The Shield Captain charged them, made it in. Calixus Assassin charged his Brotherhood Librarian, made it in. And then my Achilles Dreadnought charged his surviving Nemesis Dreadnought, made it in. Alright, so for the fight phase, I decided I would start with the Achilles Dreadnought to swing on the Nemesis. 5 attacks went to hit, wounded, and then he made 4 4-up invulnerable saves, only 1 went through. And then I rolled a 1 for the damage, and so he survives with 3 wounds. That was terrible. Then he interrupted with all of his Paladins and their Falcons, and they all swung on Trajan Valoris. They did 4 mortal wounds, which I saved 1 of because of 5-up feel no pain, and 8 wounds, which he saved all but 3. So it brought him down to 2 wounds left, and he survived. Then my Green Custodian squad, Swords and Shield, killed 3 of them in return. And then Trajan finished off the last one, and then my Shield Captain consolidated forward a little bit. But I do have the objective now. And my Calixus Assassin swung on his Brotherhood Librarian and hit really well, but then didn't do too good to wound. So the Calixus Assassin doesn't actually have a weapon, but he ignores all saves, including demon saves, it specifies, except invuln saves. So yeah, he needed a 4 to wound, he got 1 wound, and my opponent failed his invulnerable save, but is still alive. Then he swung with his Nemesis Dreadknight, and he rolled very badly. He had 3 attacks, all hit, 1 wounded. He spent a CP to reroll to make it wound, it failed, and I needed a 5 or 6 or my Contemptor Dreadnought died. And I rolled a 6, and he lived. And that was the fighting phase. Alright, so I controlled 1, controlled 2. I still have Precious Artifacts. Assassination, working on it. Abhor the Witch destroyed another Psyker squad, so 2 more points. Behind enemy lines, I have that. 2 squads are behind enemy lines. And so, gaining 4 points. And that was my second turn.
All right, you guys. So for movement, my red paladins and my apothecary moved forward, um, basically towards his guys. And I forgot to mention it, but the apothecary is actually going to bring a guy back for 1 command point. Fun fact.
At the end of the movie phase, yeah.
Yeah, so, and then my Dread Knight stayed in combat, my Paladin stayed in combat. Voldus, however, moved forward into the middle of that bunch of stuff. My Purple Paladin started to move forward, but he used, I guess, a Tanglefoot Grenade.
Yeah, another one.
Yeah, so they used that, so reduced their movement by 5, which was their movement, so they just stood there. And then the Paladin Ancient scooted closer to the wall so he can get in and do some stuff. And then Stern and his squad just are hanging out. And that was my movement phase. Alright, you guys, so I started with the red squad of Paladins up at the top. And they tried to hammerhand themselves, but they're at -3 because of the Plexus and the Prosecutors. So that failed. The Apothecary didn't really do anything. Then the Nemesis Dread Knight tried to smite the Dreadnought. He failed. The Purple Squad tried to hammerhand, and I think that went off. Not a lot happened this turn. Voldus smote the Shield Captain Lars Terminator armor, did 1 mortal wound, and he saved it with their mortal wound thing. The Librarian didn't do anything, and then the Green squad of Paladins down at the bottom tried to do the mission, or my Grey Knight secondary, and they failed because I rolled too low. And that was a psychic phase, just a big letdown. So, all right, you guys. So for the shooting phase, I started with the red Paladin shooting at his purple guys. Looks like they did 2 damage. Which is pretty cool. Then the Nemesis Dread Knight shot at his Contemptor Dreadnought. Nothing went through. I feel like 1 went through, but he saved it or something.
Yes.
Then my Librarian can't shoot, so Voldus shot at the Shield Captain. Nothing happened there. Then the Purple Paladins and the Ancient shot at his Green Custodians, killing 2 of them. And then my Green Paragons and Brother Captain Stern shot at his Blue Sagittarium, and they actually killed 1 of them. So, slowly chipping away, you guys. Playing the long game. And that was my shooting phase. Alright, you guys, so, for my charge phase, so he started off by tangle-footing my Purple Paladins. So originally they were going to charge both Trajan and the green guy, but because it was a -3, I decided to just charge the green guy because my charge rolls are usually garbage. And I was correct in doing so because they just barely made the charge. So they got in with the green guy. Then the Paladin Ancient charged both Trajan and the green guy because the green guy is so close to Trajan. Then Voldus charged the other Shield Captain, and then my red Paladins charged both his Prosecutors and his Custodians. They rolled an 11, so they actually got all the way, and they needed like a 7, I think. And then the Apothecary also charged both the Rhino and the red Custodians, and he rolled an 8, so he actually just barely got in, but he's still in. And that was the charge phase. Alright, you guys, so in the fight phase, I started off with my Paladin Ancient swinging on Valoris, who I thought did 1 wound, did he? Oh no, you negated it with his ability. And then he interrupted for 1 point because of the Custodian stratagem for being on an objective, and he swung and he killed 1 of my Red Squad Paladins, and did 4 damage to my Apothecary. Then I swung with my Purple Squad, killing the 1 green guy left, because obviously it's just a bunch of hammers. And then I swung with Grandmaster Valdis, who did 3 damage to his captain, so basically 1 wound went through there. Then he swung with his dreadnought, finishing off my dread knight, and then my librarian swung on his assassin, whiffed again, and only one wound went through, of which he saved. And then he ended up killing the librarian, and then Valoris swung on my purple paladins, killing 2 of them off. And then the shield captain swung on Voldus, doing 3 damage because I had some pretty good saves.
Yeah, rolling 5 dice and all of them being 4 up except for 1. That's ridiculous.
That's right. And then the Rhino swung on the Apothecary, doing nothing. And that was the fight phase, you guys.
And the Calixtus assassin killed his enemy. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So for points, I started off with 1 primary. I'm still holding my priority objective, so I got another 3 points there. Purifying Ritual, I was not able to do this time because of the Calixtus. No prisoners, I'm slowly building up my tally. And Engaged in All Fronts, I still have not been able to get 2 points on it because of the distance from the other table quarters. And so that was my turn in points. This game is probably almost over though, so we'll see what happens in this next turn.
Yeah, and at the end of this one, I did kill his character, so 3 in assassination and 3 in a Hoard of the Witch just for that. Oh, actually no, 2 more because I killed the Dread Knight as well. Yeah, and yeah. Alright, so for the movement phase, a bunch of things on the top left shifted around. My Rhino fell back, so did the Prosecutors. The Contemptor Dreadnought moved up, and the Sagittarians also moved up to get line of sight. I spent 2 CP in the command phase with Valoris. I was able to get 1 back. Where Unleash the Lions, where my Alaris, instead of become 1 squad of 4, become 4 squads of 1, and they can spread out and go wherever. 1 went to take the top left objective, which I now realize the Calixtus assassin should have just ran to it and hold it there. So that Alaris is going to be holding the back objective. Everyone else ran on their own towards the bottom-ish middle. And that was it for the movement phase. Alright, so for shooting, the purple Sagittariums fired at the Apothecary, did nothing. Then the Contemptor Achilles Dreadnought fired his Achilles Dread Spear at him and deleted him. After that, then there really wasn't anything else that I could shoot at. So my blue Sagittarians at the bottom, Mag dumped his Paladins and managed to kill 1. And that was the shooting phase. Alright, so for charges, the Achilles Dreadnought charged the red squad, needed a 6 because -2 because of difficult terrain, made it in. Then the Calixtus Assassin charged his Grandmaster Voldus, and that was it. Alright, so it was a huge back and forth. So first my Achilles Dreadnought swung, and I rolled horribly, and he only killed 1. Really sad. After that, my Calixtus Assassin swung on his character, his general, and did 1 wound to it. After that, his general swung on my shield captain and Alaris Terminator armor, and it brought him down to 2 wounds. And then I swung back with Trajan Valoris, and he killed 2 of the purple Paragons. He rolled very badly as well. It's just like bad rolls left and right. Then my then he swung with his purple Paragons or what was left of him, and no wait, he swung with his Paladin Ancient against my shield captain, and oh yeah, that also helped bring him down to 2 wounds. So I'm just barely surviving. I made a lot of good saves, some decent rerolls and stuff. And then I swung with my Sentinels that was up the top left, did 2 damage to 1. Then his Paragons finished off Trajan Valoris. I think Trajan was killed a little sooner than this. It's hard to remember all the orders. And then after that, then my shield captain swung and finished off his general. And then his red paladins up top left swung and killed my dreadnought thingy, who should have killed them, but he rolled so poorly. And that was the fight phase. Alright, so for points, I did, my prosecutors were OBSEC and his guys were not, so I did still control the second objective on the top left. So I hold 1, hold 2. Precious artifacts, I do not have it at the end of my turn, so I lost it. Assassination, I killed his warlord. got 4 points. Abhor the Witch, that character was a Psyker, got 3 points. 4 more points for behind enemy lines. Yeah, and that is the score, and looking pretty good, all things considered. Alright, so we decided to call it for the Custodians because they had a decent lead, and the most the opponent was going to get was going to take my home objective, but then I would soon take his critical location and the center. And so from that point on, it's just the points would keep stacking heavily in my favor over him. And so, MVP, LVP for the game. So, for LVP, obviously the Sagittarians. I expected better of them. They just were not doing it. They weren't shooting enough. They weren't doing well enough. I mean, sure, they were shooting against Terminators the entire time, but it would have been better to have just another squad of shields or spears. Would have done much better. So they were the lowest performing unit. MVP is sort of a tie because a lot of characters did just very little. The Trajan could be in here, but I'm just going to keep him out just to keep things simple. So we have the Contemptor Dreadnought, this one, with a spear, because he killed quite a lot of units. He killed 2 Nemesis Dreadknights by himself. He killed a character, and he killed, whatchamacallit, one Paladin Terminator Paragons on the top left. Calexis Assassin was fun and irritated my opponent constantly. Ended up getting him an assassination and a kill, so he literally scored me 6 victory points just by himself. And he really stopped my opponent from getting some of his spells off and took a lot of focus fire away from other units that could have been more damage. So like he's a fun assassin to use. He has a lot of benefits against Psykers, but he's also hard to shift. Then I have Shield Captain Alaris. He was a tank. He took a lot of hits. He survived a tremendous amount. He was supposed to teleport to help another battle, but like Terminators that my opponent was running on the top moved so slow. It took forever for them to get to anywhere, so he was already knee-deep in combat by the time he should have teleported. But he survived, and he did pretty good damage. Then I have the Terminators who came in the back. Teleported in, they scored me a bunch of points, they wiped out a squad, they provided a lot of extra pressure, and they're barely untouched for the battle. We're doing pretty good in damage. But when it comes to MVP, these Praetors throughout the whole game would have gained me max 15 for behind enemy lines if the game went to full. So 15 points just for them. Actually, they got me 17 points because they did wipe out that one squad, and they could have gained more if clearing out the center and the bottom. This guy, he did get me 7 points, 7 victory points. Calexis has it. Straight up got me 6. The Achilles, however, he got me a total of 7 points. So it's a pretty close tie between him and points, and so I'm going to go with kills. Contemptor Dreadnought is my MVP for all of his kills and the 7 victory points he brought to me. Close second is him for the 7 points he brought for me, but he kind of sucked a bit on his combat throughout. This guy sucked at the very end. Alright, so what about you?
Well, as far as MVP goes, I think it'll have to just be the Paladins across the board. They did the damage, they held the points, they held the objectives, they're the ones who survived to the end, actually. I think only one squad got fully wiped. And that's because they took it in the face pretty hard in the middle. So I would say Paladins 100% MVP. LVP is kind of a little bit of a mix. So the Librarian, I take him fairly often with Grey Knights because I always feel like each time it'll be different, and it never is. So Librarians definitely I don't do well with them with Grey Knights. I don't know why. And then the Pregators, they just kind of hung in the back. They got me like 1 point, I think, maybe 2. I guess technically primary as well. But, and then they just died. So, the Dread Knights could technically sit in this category too, because they basically did nothing either. But I would say probably the librarian. Honestly, he couldn't even kill the one Calexis with rerolls to hit and wound. So I think my librarian is my LVP. He didn't really do anything the whole game.
Yeah. Getting hard countered by Super Assassin. Alright, and that's the MVP, LVP. Alright. Overall, the game and the armies. So for the Custodes, honestly, they survived a lot longer than I thought they would. They, apart from the disappointment of the Sagittarium, these guys were, they trucked along. They survived quite a lot and endured quite a lot. So I was actually, I didn't expect them to survive as well. And the Calexis Assassin was fun to take, to mess with people. This and the Evisaur are probably amongst the best assassins. The only reason the Calexis is good is because he ignores all armor. He's very strong against anti-Psyker, but if they're not facing a Psyker unit army, he's very good because he needs 6s to be hit at all cases unless they have +1 to hit or wound. In which case, he's really hard to shift and he's really annoying. So that's pretty fun. So as far as these Custodes, it's a fun army. It's a nice, elite, fun army. And the stratagems were very simple and easy to remember for the few that there are. And so what about you? What do you think of your Grey Knights?
Well, I like the Grey Knights. I did make some really crummy rolls. So was it the second battle round with all those charges that failed? That was a pretty big deal.
Oh, yeah.
And then I had some really bad wound rolls. So there was a couple fight phases that I did pretty poorly. Because I think the list in itself is okay. I might move some things around, but I think for the most part the list is okay. It just did not work out so well this time. Well, I do like Grey Knights.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, they're fun. They're pretty elite. They hit pretty hard. The majority of their shooting is bolters, so that's not ideal. But yeah, and then they're all psychers, so they all have smites. They all have buffs that they can give themselves. So I think that was pretty good. I mean, they're a good army. I enjoy them. You can also play with a lot more Grey Knights, so like the strike squads or even just the base troops. This time I just went with all paladins, which are like, I don't know, 45, 50 points a model or something like that.
They were hard to deal with overall.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that was the point. But then I had a lot of bad rolls, so that kind of.
Yeah, I had a lot of bad rolls at the beginning too. It was ridiculous. I couldn't make a single 4-up save. It's just terrible.
You're taking a lot of damage from shooting. It's just when it came time for actual combat, that's when it was just like, well, this is no longer working for me.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
overall,
are great.
Mm-hmm.
Just not this game.
Yeah. Well, overall, as far as the game went, I forgot about Trajan Valorous getting to refund CP on a 5-up. I forgot that almost the entire game. And so, the prosecutors, the rhinos are useful. Prosecutors are decent. They do their job. The rhinos are good for pushing forward. This map, it didn't allow the rhinos to really do anything or this objectives and stuff. I did my best to play the objective and focus, but I really like the Tanglefoot grenade. Those were fun. Those were a big deal. That really screwed you over a lot of the Tanglefoot grenades. Yeah, used them
probably
twice.
kept Trajan alive a whole nother round.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so... Yeah, and overall, the battle plan went pretty well. Some noobish mistakes of forgetting what things I could do, but that's kind of common on an army I've barely played, but it was pretty cool and fun. Overall, as far as the game flowed, it was an interesting game. It was a nice back and forth, but it slowly began to really tip in one direction towards the end, points-wise.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think game-wise, it did start off pretty evenly. You had some really bad early save rolls.
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
And then I had the one turn with really bad charges. And then some combats later that weren't so great, like roll-wise. So, like, for, like, the 3 turns I was in combat with the Calexis, I only got 1 wound off. even though multiple like hit and stuff. So, and so just stuff like that. So I think that's the hard part with like two like super elite armies is that not that it comes down to the dice rolls, but those I think have like the randomness of dice has more of an effect when it's like two like super elites because they're super sturdy and then they're super lethal. So really it's like, okay, who's gonna have the better rolls? Who's dying?
Yeah, a lot of chess moving, and the center, all those charges that failed. I was like expecting one. I was hoping one to fail in the middle, and then the other one to make it, and so then my captain and Trajan would heroically intervene and just slaughter you in return. But like that was a pretty good accident.
So yeah, so there was all of that. But so I don't know. I mean, I could have had something in reserves, or I could have sent something away. But after all the failed charges in the middle, because I had what is that teleport one? It's called Gate of Infinity. So I could have actually teleported a paladin squad away into like your back corner or something. But with all the failed charges, it's like, no, I kind of need them where they're at. Because there's too much alive in the middle still. Yeah. And so that was kind of the problem there. And then my units were pretty slow, except the Dread Knights, but then the Dread Knights didn't actually do very much. Which could equate to bad rolling, but
Yeah.
So the game just didn't go in my favor. I think both armies they're both great armies.
Yeah.
So it's just the little things that kind of tip the scales on this one.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, dice are gonna dice, but playing the objective, folks. I don't know. It's hard to say which one of us was the better player in this. Now that I think about it, it is kind of hard to say which one of us was the better player. Dealing with what we were given.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. All right then. Well, GG's. Yeah, no idea what I'm playing next week, and you maybe likewise. So, like I said before at the beginning, like the video if you like the video, comment if you want to comment, share if you want to share, and more to come. Bye.